Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our webinar to learn more about ERA's $40 million Advanced Materials Challenge. My name is Isabella Tarasco, Technology Investment Lead with Emissions Reduction Alberta, or ERA. Today, I am joined by Justin Riemer, ERA's CEO, and Chris Owttrim, ERA's Executive Director of Technology and Innovation. Thank you for joining us. Before we get things started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are. In the spirit of reconciliation, we have the privilege of living, working, and investing on traditional territories, which include Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations, Métis Nations Regions 3 and 4, Inuit, and all others who live and care for these lands. Acknowledgements like this are just part of the starting steps on a journey of reconciliation. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to start by going through a few housekeeping items just to make sure we get the most of our time today. First of all, we are expecting a lot of participants today, so everyone's microphone is muted to avoid unintentional background noise. If you encounter technical challenges related to the webinar connection, please email Kevin at kduncan@eralberta.ca and we will try to help you if we can. However, if you can't resolve your technical issues or if you need to leave early, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website. It will be uploaded on our webpage for the Advanced Materials Challenge, which is linked off our homepage and on our funding page. The recording will include both the presentation and the live Q&A with audio. Speaking of the Q&A, for those who have joined us or others on the GoToWebinar in the past, you might notice a change in the look and feel. On the top right of your screen, you will notice a question mark item. Clicking on this will open a side panel where you can type your questions. A quick note, please do not enter questions into the comments section. In terms of an agenda for today, we have 1 hour together. First, Justin will talk briefly about ERA and our mandate. Next, Chris will provide an overview of the Advanced Materials Challenge. We'll cover some key points regarding scope and eligibility for the call, the submission process, and the timelines around the funding decision. And finally, we'll end off by answering some of your questions. So if you have any questions you would like us to address, please type them into the questions section of the GoTo control panel as we go. Again, you'll see a question mark icon in the top navigation panel. We will answer as many as we can, but if we don't address your question, you are welcome to follow up with us afterwards. And so with that, I will pass it over to Justin to get us started.
Thanks very much, Isabella, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and talk a little bit about the work we do at ERA and the impacts we're seeing. First of all, I want to say how grateful I am to have shared this announcement on this funding opportunity at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, with Minister Rebecca Schultz, our Minister of Environment. Alberta has a very strong message to share with the world in terms of the tangible things we're actually doing to reduce emissions in a variety of sectors. And we had a chance to get that message out at COP in the past couple of weeks. Our message was well received and really happy that we could do so in conjunction with government and industry. A big part of it is our approach. Since 2009, that's 15 years ago, ERA has invested the proceeds from carbon pricing on large emitters to reduce greenhouse gases and strengthen the competitiveness of new and existing industries in Alberta and create jobs. Our funding is sourced from those large emitters who are required to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to meet regulated targets under the Government of Alberta's tier regulation. And we offer a clear line of sight of those funds to the investments made in technology solutions needed to help achieve emissions reduction and economic growth. Since 2009, we've committed close to $1 billion towards 296 projects worth over $7.4 billion. That's a tremendous leverage. Our investments are helping advance technologies in areas that include satellites to measure methane emissions, hydrogen-powered transit buses, trucks and trains, drones to plant trees in dangerous and difficult areas, and production of renewable energy and high-quality fertilizer from food waste. It's important to note we require one-to-one investment from our private sources, and this is important. Public funding is not enough on its own to accelerate these new technologies. Industry needs to have skin in the game. Historically, we've significantly exceeded that one-to-one requirement. So for every dollar invested by ERA, we average almost $7 in investments from other funders. This leverage is an important part of ERA's process, and it's important to ensure industry and the market see that there is a demand for the technology. Job creation is also a critical outcome of our work, and our modeling suggests that our investments will generate over 46,000 person-year jobs by 2027 and contribute nearly $7 billion to Alberta's GDP. And those numbers jump to 63,000 and more than $9 billion when looked at the national level. We're very proud of this outcome. The other thing we like to talk about is the balance of portfolio. Traditionally, ERA may have been perceived as being an organization that invests largely in the oil and gas industry, but that is no longer true. We have a very diversified portfolio, as you can see on the following slide. While oil sands is our largest emitter and largest contributor into the tier fund, we have a growing sector diversity in a variety of technologies in the agriculture, forestry, renewable space, beginning to invest in critical minerals, digital equipment to help process optimization, as well as electricity generation and storage. We're very keen on seeing advancements and diversity in our portfolio of investments, and hence our focus for this round of funding on advanced materials, where we've had some investments in the past, would like to grow that market segment even further in our portfolio. So one of the big contributors to what we do in the innovation system is our technology roadmap, which is really like ERA's investment prospectus. It's a guiding document that serves as a catalyst for our technology and solution investments, and is all-encompassing in terms of sectors in Alberta. Primarily, it guides our investments and lays out the pathways for Alberta to become a global hub for clean innovation and technology. But it's more than an investment guide. It outlines our key technology areas that we will focus on to enable Alberta to build off its strengths and have a competitive economy. We have game-changing emissions reduction technologies at various stages of development in this province, and our goal is to have a range of other additional technologies deployed in the market as quickly as possible. So for this reason, I'm happy to share that we've established new objectives for our latest roadmap, and I'd get you to go to our website and have a read. Those 5 cross-cutting technology areas are carbon management, improved efficiency, emerging energy, industrial decarbonization, and circular economy. And what we're talking about largely here today is carbon management and the circular economy. Important in the 5 areas are they're positioned to avoid a single pathway approach based on the premise that the solutions for all 5 areas will be necessary and valuable in any future carbon neutral scenario. These are the technology pathways that are expected to have the greatest economic and potential impact in terms of GHG emissions as well as economic generation, and are the most relevant to our mandate. They are very much aligned with the Government of Alberta's emission reduction and energy development plan, and they're designed to help us reach provincial, national, and global environmental and energy development goals. Please be sure to visit our website and download this important document. So our technology roadmap and our business plan guide our investments, and I'll quickly share how it works from here. Projects are selected primarily through competitive funding opportunities, and a few of our past ones are highlighted here. We also have a partnership intake program where we review projects referred to us by our many trusted partners. The last thing to note here is that last year, ERA committed to repeating the Industrial Transformation Challenge on an annual basis. So every spring going forward, we will have a more general call entitled Industrial Transformation to enable a wide variety of sectors to apply for funding on a consistent basis. And while your project may not be ready at this time, always know that there is a call into the future that you could be eligible for. This gives us more predictable funding model, and one that will, with these general calls, will span technologies and sectors year over year. And the other call that we do, and this one in specifically the Advanced Materials Challenge, is one that we will do likely on every fall going forward. So if you can't make the deadlines laid out for this call, or you have some ideas in the early stages of development, you'll have another chance in the spring to apply for funding. Picking up on the thread of partnerships, these are central to ERA success. Working with trusted partners across Canada's innovation ecosystem allows us to leverage funds and due diligence, share risk, and reduce administrative burden for applicants. We work with strategic trusted partners in Alberta. You can see on the logos on this slide, with the federal government and across the country where appropriate. Currently, we have 14 trusted partnership agreements. A few of them that are key to us are Alberta Innovates, Natural Resources Canada, and Prairies Can. Most recently, we've signed agreements with Avatar Innovation, Plug and Play, and the Métis Settlement Development Corporation. These trusted partners allow us to evaluate referred projects and consider funding promising technologies that others are considering at this time outside of our traditional call processes, and specifically through our partnership intake program. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to get into the details.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'm really pleased that we're here today to talk about our latest funding opportunity. And as Justin mentioned, this is our annual, more focused funding call. This year, we've elected to focus this funding challenge on the material space with our Advanced Materials Challenge, offering up to $40 million for scale-up, pilot, demonstration, and first-of-kind projects that will help to shape the circular economy and support low-emissions products. This includes improving materials like concrete, plastics, food, forest products, chemicals, and more, as well as investing in new material products like carbon fiber, critical minerals, and materials that enable other clean technologies, from carbon capture to energy storage and beyond. This funding call will help increase the competitiveness of Alberta's existing manufacturing and resource sectors while growing new provincial industries with significant export potential, and significantly reduce the carbon footprint of our materials supply chains that are so essential to our economy. So I'll get into further details later, but as Justin mentioned, we do see a wide range of technologies fitting across this call across a wide range of sectors. So I'll start with a bit of background and context for you. And whenever we put together a funding call, we work with a set of subject matter experts, our partners in the ecosystem, and the government to ensure alignment and connection with industry needs. That's where this call comes from, and so I'd like to take you through some of the background. Many of you on the call will know that Alberta ranks third among Canadian provinces when it comes to overall production of manufactured goods and materials. And of course, when you add natural resource production to that, we're very much a leader in Canada. Our manufacturing sector consists of several subsectors, including food, plastics, metal, machinery, forest products, and chemicals. And within all of those sectors, there's an emerging need to reduce the embodied carbon of those products while enhancing their material properties and improving the circularity of how we deal with those products throughout their life cycle and at their end of life. There's also significant efforts underway to develop new material sectors and products within Alberta. These include non-combustion products such as carbon fiber and asphalt binders from Alberta's hydrocarbon resources, high-value metals such as vanadium, titanium, and lithium, novel bioproducts and biomaterials, and carbon-based materials products via conversion of captured carbon dioxide. In addition to their direct economic and environmental benefits, these material solutions can facilitate secondary effects such as supporting advanced industries such as battery and fuel cell manufacturing and enabling lighter and more durable consumer products used in everyday life. So it really is a win-win situation. However, a lot of these technologies are at a fairly nascent stage in Alberta. We're at a critical point in their development where funding support can significantly accelerate their development and their commercialization prospects. I think what I'd like to acknowledge at this point is that many of these technology solutions, specifically for new and emerging materials categories, have really received a lot of support and leadership from our partners at Alberta Innovates over the years. And we've been monitoring them closely, and we believe that many of these solutions are now at the stage where they are primed for further scale up with the backing that ERA can provide. At the same time, there remains a pressing need to continue development of those technologies that are at earlier technology readiness levels. And so we know that Alberta Innovates will continue to play a vital role in fostering this innovation. And we are looking forward to collaboration opportunities even within this funding challenge that I'll touch on later. Lastly, a key reason that we're putting tier dollars to work in this space is that the government of Alberta has signaled priority areas for investment within the material space within Alberta's economy, including things I've already touched on, like critical minerals. And so we're very happy to be aligning with the government and working with them closely to deliver this funding challenge. So let's talk dollars. In this funding competition, we're making a total of up to $40 million available, with a maximum of $5 million per project. We've also indicated a minimum funding level of $250,000, which really reflects the scale of solutions and projects that we're targeting here. So if your project is smaller than that, or you don't need you need less than $250,000 of ERA funding, there are other funding supports available for you in the ecosystem that target those earlier stage projects. And again, that's part of our value proposition in working with our trusted partners in the ecosystem. As is always the case, ERA's funds must be matched, and so we'll only match contributions towards eligible expenses on a minimum of a one-to-one basis. And as Justin noted, that leverage is on average much higher and is a really key part of our value proposition. I also mentioned we're working to leverage our funding and our process with other trusted partners where possible, both within Alberta and across Canada. And so in some cases, there may be an opportunity for us to share your proposals with our trusted partners and explore the possibility for additional funding from those organizations. So as part of the application process, we'll ask your permission to share your proposal with trusted partners. And I really encourage you to check that box. You really have nothing to lose. A common question we get is who should apply and who's eligible for ERA funding in this call for proposals? ERA is built on the philosophy that good ideas can come from anywhere and anyone. And indeed, we're open to applications from just about any type of organization. So that means innovators, technology developers, commercial and industrial operators, municipalities, Indigenous communities, industry associations, small and medium-sized enterprises, research and development organizations, universities, not-for-profits, and even individuals could be eligible to participate in this challenge. And because those good ideas can come from anywhere, we do not actually require that the applicant themselves are Alberta-based. So we want the project, that is the specific activities that we're investing in, to happen in Alberta. We want to see construction, operation, and ideally use of those material products in Alberta. The technology, the IP, and the company leading the project can be located anywhere. And so because of that, partnerships, although not strictly necessary, are a really strong part of the value proposition and a key part of how you, if you're an outside of Alberta applicant, can help demonstrate your connection and footprint within the province. Specifically, and where you can, I really want to encourage all applicants to work with partners in Alberta, such as post-secondary and research institutions, Indigenous communities, cooperative organizations, and municipalities. We know that in the material space, it often takes a village to get a new product or new technology to market. And so I really want to encourage you to take advantage of all the wonderful partnerships and supports that the Alberta innovation ecosystem has to offer. We also know that by supporting those sort of partnerships, even at this early stage of technology development, we can help attract and retain highly skilled workers, increase Alberta's innovation capacity, engage local communities, and leverage complementary resources. So now I'll get into the meat of the webinar, which is where by far the most common questions crop up in every one of our funding calls, and that is, what sort of technologies are you thinking about when you say advanced materials in this case? So I will say that in all of our funding programs, ERA is not technology prescriptive. We're not going to give you a specific list that you must check a box in order to be eligible for the call. However, what we like to do is lay out a series of examples that help sort of draw the bounds around what we think could be strong opportunities in this particular funding competition. So obviously, as the name implies, all opportunities funded under this call must be relevant to materials products. The next couple of slides will help outline some of those, a non-exhaustive list of examples that ERA believes could be strongly aligned. And again, I want to stress that this is not the total list of things that are eligible, and it is not prescriptive in terms of the sectors or the products that we will provide funding to in this call. So without further ado, I'll run through a few examples over this slide and the next. First of all, we're interested in novel carbon materials. So I've alluded to things like carbon nanotubes, carbon fibers, or carbon composites. And it's really important to note we're interested in both the production of those materials and their application in different sectors. So biocompatibility, smart materials, sensors, the use of graphene, and integrating other carbon materials into energy storage products and other technologies. All of these things could fit under that umbrella. We're also interested in the production of carbon fibers and other non-combustion products from Alberta's bitumen or other hydrocarbon resources. Again, this is a key area of investment for Alberta Innovates over the past couple of years that they've led, and we're very excited to be picking up the thread here and hopefully moving some of these technologies to the next stage. Another key area for the government of Alberta and for ERA is circular plastics and other low emissions plastics technologies. So within that area, we're looking at things like novel recycling processes for plastics, advanced plastic formulations, or incorporation of biogenic or other alternative feedstocks, as well as plastic repurposing and reuse into secondary and tertiary products. Other areas of interest on the same slide are advanced material solutions with applications in carbon capture and storage. We know that ERA has made a number of investments into what I'll call first generation carbon capture, as well as some emerging next generation capture solutions. And what we've observed is that there's going to need to be some materials breakthroughs in order to help those next generation capture solutions really flourish. So that could include things like next generation amines and solvents, ionic liquids, novel physical sorbents, novel enzymatic or biological processes for carbon capture, or novel membranes. And so there's quite a different number of ways in which materials technologies can help us solve the carbon capture challenge. And last on this slide is biochar and the production of other carbon absorbing materials. We know that these have potentially significant potential in terms of their ability to not only absorb carbon, but sequester it in the long term. But there remains gaps in terms of how they're produced and how they're applied and how that permanent sequestration is validated. So there's a number of opportunity areas that we see in that space. Moving to my second slide of technology examples. First up is critical minerals that I've alluded to previously. This is a key area of interest for the province in terms of developing new high-value natural resources. When we say critical minerals, again, we take a very broad approach. It could include anything from titanium, lithium, vanadium, and a number of other materials that are present in Alberta's natural resources and brines. We're also looking for, as I said, some materials technology solutions that will help enhance or improve our current materials production. So when you think about all of the materials that are currently produced in Alberta, like cement, forest products, and plastics, there's a number of ways in which those products can be enhanced. So a couple of examples include substitutionary cementitious materials, novel formulations or chemistries for things like plastics and ceramics, and material additives and advanced manufacturing techniques. We'll also see the application of materials in industry as a particularly exciting area. So almost every industry, no matter what they produce or how they do it, has the need for things like membrane separations or heat transfer efficiency. And materials are often a key part of that solution. So anything from better insulation materials, better catalyst, materials enablers for clean industrial heat like electrodes, and coatings, metallurgical improvements, and similar. All of these things can help improve the efficiency of our current industries with that materials technology. Lastly, I mentioned there's some supply chain technologies that we're really interested in. So waste to value and recycling solutions for various waste streams, energy supply chain components for batteries, electrolyzers, et cetera, and the biomaterial supply chain, which is rapidly growing and advancing in Alberta. So things like I mentioned biofeedstock, biomaterials, and bioadditives for other products. One last piece here is I'll just say the thrust of all of our big funding competitions is that we are looking for that next generation of technology and opportunities to substantially advance technology. So within all of these categories, I know there's a range of technology readiness levels and commercial readiness levels represented. What ERA is all about is taking things that are near commercial and pushing them over that final hump to be able to be broadly adopted. So again, some of the things I've listed might sound like business as usual to you, or they might sound way off in the future to you. What we're looking for is within each of those categories, the sweet spot of technologies that are right at that primed for scale up. I would be remiss to not take a couple of moments just to talk about out of scope technologies, because in all of our funding programs, we remain significantly oversubscribed with more applications than we're able to fund. And so we do need to draw some boundaries and some exclusions from the call scope to ensure that we're evaluating projects on an apples to apples basis, and so that all applications are contributing to the intention of the call. So you'll see listed here a few areas that we've flagged as maybe being tangential to the call, but not directly within scope in order to balance that application volume. So things like business as usual recycling or waste management processes, we know there's a lot of overlap between these sort of technologies and a lot of the material solutions, but what we don't want to do is simply invest in last year's technology solution for recycling or upcycling of waste. We are really looking for those next generation solutions. Secondly is production of plastics or biochar without an end user. And this is key because there's a lot of materials technologies out there that while you may be able to produce a lot of product, if you don't have an end use market and you don't have an application of that product, the benefits will not be realized. So we want to make sure that all projects that apply have that clear line of sight to end use. Thirdly, projects whose primary focus is production of biofuels or other fuels. Again, there's a lot of overlap between biotechnologies, plastics technologies, recycling technologies that may all have a fuel production component. We just don't want that to be the core focus of your project. And the simple reason for that is that fuels are ultimately a consumed resource and are not a material in sort of a strict engineering definition. And we have numerous other funding opportunities for fuels, both within our partnership program and other upcoming funding rounds. Lastly is the issue of pre-construction studies or other standalone projects that do not result in actual construction and operation of a technology. And this is a particularly important point. We've seen really strong demand and increased demand for supporting studies over the past couple of years. And indeed, we've made some strategic investments in that area. However, we've primarily done that through other funding programs like our partnership intake program. And so for the purposes of the Advanced Materials Challenge, we will not be accepting pre-construction studies. We want to see all projects involve a capital or actual operational component. I've alluded a couple times to the technology stage of development that we're looking for with the technologies we hope to fund under this call. And I've alluded to technology readiness levels, but we often get questions about what that actually means. And so in terms of the specifics of what ERA is hoping to fund in this call, we are really looking at the activities that are listed here on the slide. There is a bit of a unique twist in this call. And so while typically ERA funds projects in the later stages of development, starting with technology readiness level 7 to 9. So if you think about late stage pre-commercial demonstrations, commercial pilots, and then first of kind commercial implementation, that's historically been where ERA has invested. And that's always aligned quite nicely with Alberta Innovate's mandate to invest in technologies at the earlier stages of development, typically TRLs 3 to 5 or 3 to 6. This call, more than any of the others we've done recently, represents a really strong opportunity for enhanced collaboration between ERA and Alberta Innovates, because of the broad range of technologies spanning all of those TRL levels that I just mentioned that pertain to the materials area. In light of this, ERA plans to accept projects as early as technology readiness level 5 in this call, and will work closely with Alberta Innovates to manage and triage those earlier TRL opportunities. This collaborative approach ensures that project developers will receive tailored support throughout the spectrum of innovation, from lab scale and bench scale research and development, all the way through to those first of kind commercial deployments. So we will be collaborating with Alberta Innovates to identify submissions to this call that show merit, but maybe fall in those earlier stages of development. And as appropriate and with permission, some proposals may be considered for funding support by Alberta Innovates instead of ERA or in parallel with ERA. It is incumbent on all applicants to show how their project scope aligns with the definitions of technology readiness that we've provided, and to justify the reasonableness of achieving the proposed project objectives based on the current technology readiness levels at the start of the project. And I encourage you to spend a bit of time with the definitions of those TRLs in the call guidelines. So what do I mean when I say project, and what is ERA really looking to fund in this call? Let me start out by saying that, again, our intention is to fund capital P projects with clear objectives, milestones, timelines, deliverables, and a budget that ultimately take a technology from point A to point B in its advancement towards commercialization. And that, by the way, involves some form of operation or production at the end of the day. We don't simply fund ongoing operations, expansions of existing plants, or open-ended programs like a 5-year research program. And we don't simply buy down the cost of materials. So I want to be very clear that this is not a procurement program, and we need you to present a clear project with a clear off-taker or end user, as I mentioned before. We ask that all applicants clearly delineate the scope of the project for which ERA funding is being requested, and base your proposal around the benefits that are associated specifically with that scope of work. Any related work completed concurrently or before the project, but outside the scope of ERA's funding, may be discussed in your proposal, but should be clearly indicated. We really want to have a good understanding of what ERA's funding will be going towards. In this challenge, the maximum length of a project is 3 years from initiation, plus sufficient operational time to generate that important performance data and lessons learned. So for clarity, all construction commissioning activities must be completed within 3 years of our funding award, but we will allow for up to 1 year of additional post-commissioning operational time. And in terms of project initiation, we know that projects often don't align with approval cycles and must align with things like internal approvals and plant turnaround times. So at ERA's discretion, successful applicants may request a delayed start of up to 12 months after funding approval in cases where there's a need to align with facility operations or scheduled turnarounds. However, without strong justification, we will be expecting all funded projects in this call to commence work within 120 days of ERA's funding approval, and ideally much sooner. The last thing in terms of location is particularly important. I mentioned we accept applications from anywhere, but we need to see the benefits of the project happening in Alberta. And what that typically translates to is we want to see the primary location of project activities and capital deployment being in Alberta. So in some cases, there may be some work that needs to happen outside the province, for example, upfront design, things like that. But we ultimately want to see the benefits of the project, whether those be economic, emissions reductions, and other benefits, happening in Alberta. And we want to see you make a strong case for the market for your technology within Alberta, as well as export opportunities. Next, I'll quickly run you through our submission and evaluation process. And I'll map this to our timelines on the very next slide. So for here, you can see the diagram that outlines our two-stage evaluation process followed by an execution phase. In the expression of interest, or EOI stage, applicants are invited to provide an overview of their proposed project, which is a relatively short document, 10 pages maximum, that will be submitted to our online system. So that's the stage that we're at right now, and the deadline for this stage is January 22nd. And I want to be very clear that we will not extend the deadline and we will not accept late submissions. So please plan to submit, ideally even before the deadline, to make sure your proposal gets in. After all the EOIs have been submitted, they are evaluated by a team of independent experts, and ERA has a long history of bringing together some of the best and brightest to evaluate the proposals that we get. So we bring together evaluators with subject matter expertise in business, financing, science, engineering, GHG quantification, and a number of other areas to ensure that we get a well-rounded perspective on each project. After the EOI evaluation process, a short list of projects will be invited to submit what we call a full project proposal, or FPP, which includes more detail about the proposed project and the expected outcomes, as well as the implementation plan if funding is awarded. At that full proposal stage, a proposal advisor is assigned by ERA to each applicant at the time the full proposal invitation is sent out. This advisor is made available to help guide applicants through the process and will provide feedback, if requested, on the full project proposal while they're under development. Again, we'll ask you to submit full project proposals, and these will again be evaluated by an independent team of experts. In addition, all full project proposal applicants will be invited to offer an oral presentation to the review team. This process culminates with an in-depth review meeting where all projects are discussed in detail and a recommendation is brought forward to our board of directors for consideration. And I should note that all final funding decisions in this call will be made by ERA's board of directors. Once those final funding decisions are made, so we're now in the project execution stage, we will enter into legal agreements with successful applicants to detail the terms and obligations of each party as it relates to our contribution and the completion of the project. Another important detail that pertains to the execution phase is that our funding is distributed on a milestone by milestone basis upon completion of activities and the actual incidence of costs. And the progress of each project is monitored and reported on throughout the course of the project plan. At the end of each project, all recipients are required to produce a final outcomes report, which ERA will share publicly for the broader benefit of Alberta. One last thing I'll note on this slide is that our entire project evaluation process is overseen by an independent fairness monitor that reports directly to ERA's board of directors. We take fairness and integrity of the process very seriously, and if at any time you have a fairness concern or something you want to flag, our team is always available to hear those concerns. So as promised, I'll next move to the timelines for this particular funding call. The most critical timeline that you need to be aware of right now is that we have a deadline for submission of your expression of interest of January 22nd, 2025 at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's just about 60 days from today. Projects that are shortlisted in the EOI phase will be notified by email in March of next year and will have until April to provide their full project proposals. We'll schedule your oral presentations, again for shortlisted applicants, in May of 2025, and final funding decisions will be made at our board meeting in June, and you'll be notified shortly thereafter. From there, as I mentioned, successful applicants will enter into a contribution agreement with ERA, and we'll be looking to kick off the projects in the summer and into the fall of next year. I mentioned earlier that ERA takes knowledge sharing and sharing of final reports very seriously, and so we do require all funding recipients to report on project outcomes, achievements, and lessons learned. This includes key metrics like greenhouse gas reductions, job creation, and other environmental, economic, and social benefits. And we're also committed to encouraging widespread knowledge dissemination from our funded projects to maximize the benefit of ERA's investment. This is a critical component of our funding to share knowledge and encourage broader and more informed decision-making on future investments. In addition to the written reports that we'll publish, ERA may require recipients to commit to specific activities such as hosting of knowledge-sharing workshops or participation in ERA lessons learned activities. And we've seen a great deal of value and interest in the lessons learned events that we did last year, and we're looking forward to the ones that will come out of this funding call. As mentioned, we host several events annually, like our lessons learned workshops and numerous appearances at conferences and trade shows. We also continue to reach new audiences through our Carbon Copy podcast, which features interviews with experts and innovators on topics about technology, engineering, and the economics of a low-carbon future. So if you haven't heard enough of my voice or Isabella's voice on this webinar, please do check out the Carbon Copy podcast. Our recent episodes have touched on everything from carbon capture utilization and storage technologies, geothermal energy, energy storage, management of methane emissions from cattle, unlocking hydrogen, and many more technology areas. And we really hope to get some great new podcast episodes out of some of the fantastic projects that I know will be funded in this funding call. In addition, we bring some of the stories of our funded projects to life through a video series that we've been producing. And I will say these are fantastic videos, little bite-sized and easily watchable over your lunch hour, or if you're like me, on the train on the way to work. And they really do give a great narrative and overview of some of the really cool investments that ERA has made recently. So all of these opportunities in combination are ways that we will help promote the results and outcomes of your fantastic work that we've helped support, and are a key way that we promote the further adoption and dissemination of the technologies that will be supported under this funding program. So on to my last couple of slides before we turn it over to the Q&A, and I'll just go through a few more frequently asked questions about how we recommend you take steps to prepare a successful submission to this funding challenge. We often receive 10 times more funding requests than we can meet, so it's important that applicants make a very strong case for why your project should be funded. So the first piece of advice I can give you is that you need to start the process right away. From now until the submission deadline, as I mentioned, there's, I think, just about 5 weeks. And we know it doesn't take that long to write a 10-page document, but it does take that long to forge partnerships, get internal approvals, allocate resources, and come up with a really strong narrative for the project that you're proposing. And again, not all of those things need to be finalized at the time of EOI submission. So you don't need to have every internal approval, every partnership, or every site host finalized by the time of the EOI submission deadline. But the farther along you are in those processes, the better off you are in terms of demonstrating that your project is real and ready to advance. Since all submissions need to be completed through our online portal, please go there to register an account if you don't have one already. And if you do, please go back and make sure you can still log on. We've made some recent changes to the system, so you may need to refamiliarize yourself with the interface, and you may need to check that your login credentials still work. And if you leave that to the last minute, I can tell you that's going to be a big barrier for you to be able to submit on time. Next, and I really can't emphasize this enough, is to read the Call for Expressions of Interest guidelines document. It's not a long document, and it really does answer most questions that we get on a regular basis. So if you have a project that is not eligible or doesn't fit with this call of proposals, or your timelines don't align, you can save yourself a lot of time by reading the guidelines document and figuring that out early. Another really good reason you're going to want to read through the guidelines document in detail is that it does give some key pointers on the things that we're looking for in this call. And so even reading through the background and introduction section are things I would encourage you not to skip, because it can really help you position your proposal in a way that will really help highlight how it aligns with the call. The next point is really an extension of the last one, and that is within that guidelines document, the evaluation criteria are outlined quite clearly. And I encourage you to read them in detail and understand how they pertain to the application template that is also posted on the application portal. It is these criteria that ERA will use to determine which proposal will be shortlisted for the full project proposal stage, and ultimately which ones will receive funding. So I want you to read those criteria in depth, check out the weightings that have been assigned to them, because while they're all important and all of them need to be addressed, you do need to devote the most effort and time to the ones that are highest weighted to guarantee your best chance of success. A few other points that I find helpful in putting together a strong proposal. The first thing you're going to want to do when you open up the applications template is to look in detail at the prompts we've provided under each criterion. What we've done with those prompts is help you structure your proposal and answer the key questions that our reviewers will be asking in order to determine which proposals to shortlist. So we encourage you to follow those prompts very clearly, use clear language, and address each point laid out in the template to the best of your ability. Please provide complete responses and avoid marketing terms or jargony terms. While our evaluation team does consist of subject matter experts, if they can't decipher the information that you've provided, or if they can't dig through the marketing terminology and the self-promotion to hit on the actual technology that's underlying it all, they won't be able to make a qualified assessment of the technology and ultimately give you a successful decision. Similarly, if the 10-page document is full of extraneous information or is having key gaps in terms of the questions we've asked, they won't have the confidence to move your application forward in the process. Speaking of that 10-page limit, I think it's worth noting that you are welcome and encouraged to include optional letters of support. And these letters of support do not count as part of the 10-page limit. So using them to your advantage can be very beneficial and can help you fill in some of those gaps. Last but not least, I've already mentioned this a couple of times in my spiel today, but I want to reiterate because it's probably the most important point. Please, please do not wait until the last day to submit your expression of interest. I can tell you over the years, we've lost a couple of opportunities in each call for proposals because they've run into computer problems or had an issue with their internet connection or had to reformat their document last minute and they haven't been able to submit before the deadline. As a matter of fairness to all applicants, the deadlines are something that we are quite firm on. So if you do submit early and you run into a technical difficulty, our team will be able to help you and get you where you need to be before the deadline. But if you're submitting 5 minutes before the deadline, we simply can't guarantee that we'll be able to resolve your issues. So our IT team is very happy to help you resolve those issues and is very responsive. But you don't want to be part of the last minute crowd that's going to be emailing all in the last 5 minutes because you may not get the help you need. So please start early. Please validate your submission as you go along, and please reach out to our team proactively if you run into any issues. One last thing is that I mentioned in some cases, ERA may be looking to co-fund projects or to hand off projects to some of our trusted partners. This is a really key element of what we do within the innovation ecosystem. And again, we'll never share any of your proposal materials without your permission. But I do strongly encourage you to give us that permission to share. I've only ever seen positive things happen for applicants as a result of clicking that button. And it is something that we're genuinely happy to do in terms of building those relationships and connecting you with other resources that can help support your project. The last thing I'll say in terms of the narrative that you're going to want to build in your application is to, again, read those guidelines, look at what we're talking about in the context of this specific funding call. Also, remember that ERA's funding comes from Alberta's carbon pricing system, the TIER regulation, and as such, our mandate revolves around greenhouse gas benefits. So it might be obvious to you how your technology reduces greenhouse gas benefits and aligns with TIER, but especially in the material space, we know that sometimes that case can be murky and it might not be obvious to everyone. So please make sure it's crystal clear in the proposal how your technology reduces emissions and contributes to a lower carbon future. It's also critical to indicate readiness factors such as if a site has been finalized and if your financing is in place or imminent. These things can help separate a good proposal from a great proposal and put you over that line onto the shortlist. Last but not least, please make a clear case why your project benefits more than just you as the number one recipient, and why ERA dollars will help advance the broader industry and innovation community. So that could include things like knowledge sharing, the quality of your commercialization and technology transfer plan, dissemination channels, and the extent to which you've brought in relevant and strong partners onto the project. Again, those are just some of the little things that can help differentiate you and give you the best chance of success in the process. So if you've made it this far and you're still on the line, this is your opportunity to ask questions of me and Isabella. So please type your questions into that questions pane. Again, if you have trouble finding where it is in the new GoToWebinar layout, please give us a quick email. But we'll give it a moment here as the questions start coming in, and then we'll start answering them. So thank you for your attention, and really look forward to what all of you will bring forward in this new funding competition.
Great. Okay, so as Chris mentioned, please add your questions into the question box if you haven't already. We've had a few come in. So the very first question is just the amount of submissions that any one given entity can have. So can an SME or another organization participate on more than one application? And is there a limitation for the number of submissions for each entity?
That's a really fantastic question, Isabella, and I think it's really important. So, no, we do not have a firm limit on the number of applications that any one organization or applicant can submit. And in fact, you're more than welcome to be the lead applicant on one or more proposals, as well as a partner or a consortium member of a different proposal or other proposals. However, I will stress that we are significantly oversubscribed on all of these programs. So we do expect to receive 10 times more applications than we're able to fund. What that means is that if you spread yourself too thin, you put together too many proposals, different areas, or even the same area, you risk looking unfocused to the review team and you risk diluting your value proposition. It is very unlikely that we will fund or even shortlist more than one project from the same organization in this funding call. And so again, if you're submitting 5 projects, you're taking the risk that at least 4 of those are going to be a no. So I would really encourage you to focus your efforts on your top 1 or at most top 2 opportunities that you see within your organization and put all of your effort and resources into those to give them the best chance of success rather than spreading yourself too thin with a somewhat of a scattershot approach.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Another question, can you provide the funding percentages in various milestone stages? And so when we look at these milestones, we want to see the proportion of ERA funding directly linked to that you're asking of the project. So if your project is asking for 30% of ERA funding relative to your total project value, we want to see that 30% carried through each of the milestones. The next question is, just wanting to confirm whether pre-construction studies mean engineering work like FEED or pre-FEED, and if FEED or pre-FEED costs can be part of the project.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. So absolutely, we know that projects require some of that upfront design work, pre-FEED, feasibility work, front-end engineering design, DBM, all of those things. And so if your project includes some of those elements, they are absolutely eligible costs and they can be part of your project as long as your project does ultimately get to that construction and operation phase. So what we mean when we say pre-construction studies are not eligible is really standalone pre-construction studies. So if at the end of the project, the only deliverable you'll have is a report or an engineering design, unfortunately, that's not a complete enough project for us to be able to fund in this funding call. But if you start with that engineering design and then you move to procurement, construction, commissioning, and operations, all within that 3-year or 4-year period, that is actually a great looking project and something we're certainly happy to fund.
Great. Next easy question here. Are there stacking rules? For ERA, there are no stacking rules. However, we do require a 1-to-1 match with our private funds. So our funding has to be matched to private dollars, and there's a little bit of an example in the guidelines for you there. However, if you are asking for other government funds, such as from federal or other agencies, they may have stacking limits. So please make sure that you are aware of that if that is part of your contribution. Another question here, there is a big range of funding from $250,000 up to $5 million. Does the amount of ERA funding requested impact the decision of whether a project gets funded?
Another fantastic question. I'll say as a general rule, no, we do not have a specific quota or we don't look at projects differently depending on how much you've requested. And in fact, if you look back at some of our recent funding announcements, you'll see that within a $40 or $50 million challenge, we'll fund a variety of funding asks, projects all the way from, as Isabella said, 250,000 or 500,000, all the way up to the millions or tens of millions, all within one funding competition. So our system and our processes are very much designed to accommodate that range of projects. With that said, one thing we do note in the guidelines is if you are requesting close to that maximum amount, which again for this call is $5 million, you are going to have to make a stronger case. Ultimately, $5 million out of $40 million for the whole call is 1/8 of the total allocation for the competition. So you need to come at it from that perspective. How will you convince the review team and ultimately our board to allocate such a large chunk of the funding envelope to your project? We absolutely intend to fund projects all the way up to that maximum, but they're going to be the projects that make the strongest case and justification for asking for that much. So that's just a key thing to keep in mind if you're getting up to that limit in your request.
Thanks, Chris. A little bit of a clarification question on the fuel production. So if a project has both a material and a fuel as byproducts, would this be eligible?
Great question. The answer for this competition is yes. So we are open to projects that have multiple outputs and technologies that have multiple outputs. What we really want to see is that the innovation and the key benefits from the project should be being realized on that material side. So if you're recycling plastics and you're turning the plastics into another material. But by the way, 90% of your revenue and 90% of your greenhouse gas reductions come from this fuel byproduct that you're producing. It's probably not going to look as strong of an opportunity to our review team as one where the material product is achieving most of those benefits and is really the focus of the project. So it is really about the focus and demonstrating within your narrative and within your proposal that the materials benefits and solutions are the main impetus for the project.
Great. Another question here we have, can we elaborate on collaborative submissions? And so when ERA looks at funding a project, we look at contracting with one entity. So as long as there is one lead applicant applying in our portal, that is our preference. However, we encourage applicants to work with others in the community, consortium of members to move ahead with their project.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I'll say oftentimes the strongest proposals we see are ones where they have come forward with a consortium representing both the technology provider, potentially an industry member or site host, and then in the case of this competition, an end user of that material. That would be, I think, the ideal consortium in this funding call. But again, we are open to funding just a single applicant or a lead applicant with a number of partners on the project. So there's a lot of different models that can work. Both on the previous question and on this one, that's an area where you're going to want to reach out to our review team, our applications team, if you do have any questions or want any further guidance, because it is a little bit of a case-by-case basis.
We have another question here about advice you would give applicants if they are worried about sharing too much information about their technology, or they're worried about the data they provide in the EOIs and in the FPPs. Can you provide any advice?
Yeah, this is a really critical point, and I'll stress that we have lost or missed out on good projects because the applicant simply hasn't been at liberty or been comfortable sharing enough information for us to make an informed decision. Ultimately, what we're doing here is a very data-driven process with a lot of due diligence, and we will ask some tough questions and some in-depth questions about your technology, about your business model, even about your commercial arrangements in some situations in order to make that investment decision. What I'll stress is that ERA has very robust data security, privacy, and confidentiality policies in place. And in our history with our, as Justin said, almost 300 projects that we've funded over the years, we've never had an issue with the information that an applicant has provided to us being misused, being lost. And so it is somewhat of a matter of looking at the policies we have in place, looking at the level of integrity ERA has an organization, and deciding as an applicant and as a technology provider, your level of comfort with the information you're willing to share. But I will stress that you are taking a risk by not being completely forthright or by withholding details, because that is something that can negatively impact your proposal, unfortunately.
In the critical mineral space, do we include exploration as a eligible cost?
Another very good question, and it's a similar response to the pre-construction studies. We know that for production of new mineral products, there is going to be an exploration and in some cases, a drilling element. That can be an eligible component of a larger project. Again, if that was the entirety of your project and you're just applying for the exploration phase or for the geotechnical work, and you don't have the component of actually extracting, producing, and ultimately selling that resource into a market, that's where you're going to run into challenges. So again, if you're presenting a complete project to us, you shouldn't have any issues. But if you're trying to parcel it out too much and only involve ERA in phase one of a 3 or 4 phase project, that's where we typically look at it and say maybe this isn't the right fit. So again, on those sort of project specific questions, our team is happy to sort of talk you through your specific situation and give you some advice that would fit your particular situation.
Next question is about whether applicants are able to apply to this if they have an active project with ERA, what that entails, and whether that would preclude them from getting additional funding.
Fantastic question. So as a short answer, prior recipients of ERA funding or folks that are currently working on an ERA funded project can apply for a new and additive project under this funding competition. So having a prior ERA project, whether it's been completed or whether it's active, does not make you ineligible for this challenge. But what I should stress is we are not going to fund a continuation of a current project that's not yet complete, a scale up of a current project, or simply adding to a current project or recent project in our portfolio under this competition. So what you need to do is clearly show how the scope you're requesting new ERA funding for is distinct and additive in terms of the benefits and technology potential to the current ERA project.
And the next question is around when funding must be secured by our applicants. And so we require funding to be secured when we sign a contribution agreement. However, having letters of support from potential project partners is very strong at both the EOI and the FPP phase, but we do not require this at both of those phases. We do require this when you sign the contribution agreement with us. So one more question here, I believe, before we run out of time for today. Does the ERA funding require the company to have a revenue already?
Good question. The short answer again is no. We do not have any requirements on a company to be pre-revenue or post-revenue in order to be eligible to receive funding. Again, if you are in a pre-revenue situation, you're going to have to make a strong case for how you will be financing the project. And there's obviously a number of different ways to finance a project: equity raises, debt, contributions from funding partners, and other means. So as long as you're presenting a compelling and clear line of sight to funding the project, there is no requirement to be a revenue generating company or have your own balance sheet and cash flow to support the project. So there's other ways to make it work. Of course, if you are a company with a strong balance sheet or a strong equity position that can self-fund the project, we're very happy to look at that as a way to confirm financing too.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for your interest and participation today. If you do have unanswered questions from our webinar after reviewing our supporting material and the guidelines, please feel free to email us using our applications inbox, that is applications@eralberta.ca. Finally, we hope to have this webinar as well as the slides posted on our website by the end of this week. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day.